If you're looking to buy a property, whether it's for your own home or for an investment property, odds are it's one of, if not the largest financial decision that you're ever going to make. So that being the case, it makes a lot of sense to me to seek some professional advice for making that purchase. One of the key professionals you may want to consider engaging when you're buying a property is a buyer's advocate. So in today's chat with Lauren Allingham from Beckett Property, who is a licensed buyer's advocate, we have a great discussion around what it is a buyer's advocate does and how they can help you make the right decision around your property purchase. We also have a great chat around the buying process and things to be careful of when you do buy a property, as well as when you do select a buyer's advocate. What are some of the key questions that you need to be asking your buyer's advocate to make sure that they're working for your best interests and not those of a builder or a developer? I hope you enjoy the chat. Lauren, thanks very much for joining me today. Just for everyone out there today, it'd be great if you can just introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about your professional background and how you got into your current role as a buyer's advocate.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat. I've been in real estate now for just over a decade, but had an entirely different career previously. And it's been a real organic kind of journey to get into the buying space and helping residential buyers navigate the Melbourne market. Initially, my job previously, I was in the financial services industry way back when I was qualified as a financial planner. That feels like a lifetime ago. And I did that for a short period of time. And then I was climbing the corporate ladder on the insurance side of that industry, which was great and very rewarding. But I knew that it probably wasn't what I wanted to do forever. I was very motivated actually to start my own business. I didn't know doing what. But yeah, for a long time, I knew that was a real driver for me. And that actually led me into real estate, not buyer advocacy at the time. So 10 years ago, I decided that there was a real opportunity in the market where we could I could start a residential rent roll. So managing tenants, because I'd felt, and in my personal experience, that there wasn't amazing service for landlords or for tenants. And I stress the tenants thing because I think that was a real missing piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, it seems every time you hear a horror story, it's the tenants are the ones that are at the wrong end of it. They're really copying it.
Yeah. But I approached it as treat them with respect. It is still their home. Sure, they're the owner, but they are the occupant. And yeah, that's what I did. I launched into real estate very much head first, having no other experience, and just dived into the residential property management. And yeah, ran that business with my dad, who was my business partner. I dragged him out of retirement and said, come and run this with me.
Right. That would have been fun and pretty cool working with your dad for a while.
It was awesome. It was super rewarding. I'd always wanted to start a business with him because I just knew that he'd be a great operator. And we did that really successfully for about 7.5 years.
So was he in the same industry beforehand as well? Or?
Nah, he worked in the greeting card industry. So just completely unrelated. But he'd run small businesses and he was just a workhorse. So you know that you want to get into business with somebody who's a real hard worker. So yeah, we did that. And that was an awesome opportunity to just see hundreds of properties over the years. So over sort of the 7.5 years that we ran the business, we were in and out of homes all the time. We would get to see, you'd lease a property, 2 different properties on a Saturday, the same time of year, maybe same number of bedrooms and bathrooms. So you think it might attract a similar volume of renters, but one would get 60 groups through on a Saturday and the other one would get 2 or 3. So that experience really taught me so much about good and bad real estate, that there are fundamental factors that will deter people from wanting to live in a property, whether you're renting it or buying it. And that was invaluable experience.
Oh, it'd be an amazing foundation for doing what you do now, particularly because you would see a lot of investor clients that are looking to buy into the market and they're looking for an attractive property for renters because that's obviously how they're going to make their money on their investment. So having that skill set and many years doing the hard yards, building that original business, almost a perfect foundation for getting in and doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to see a lot and really learn the pros and cons of real estate broadly, because I think in Australia, we're all brought up with the philosophy that any real estate is good real estate. Just
Mm.
get in, just buy as soon as you can afford it, as soon as you've got enough deposit, just get into the market. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people make some mistakes in that space, and it's very costly. I saw that in my business over the years, and I also made a fairly big mistake myself buying an off the plan property. So these experiences, my own personal investing experiences, some great and some not so great, as well as watching hundreds of clients make good and bad investments, it just became a really organic progression into helping people make really good property choices.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, well, it sounds like that's a wealth of experience that you just can't buy when you get into a role such as yours as an advocate. So, for those people out there that are looking to buy a property, often it's pretty overwhelming, particularly if you're a first home buyer. You
Yeah.
don't even really know what all of these professionals that operate in the property space do. So,
Mm.
can you tell us a little bit about exactly what a buyer's advocate actually does and how you help clients?
Yeah, it is important to probably ask questions around the scope of an advocacy. So I'll let you know what I do, but there are definitely different levels of advice and advocacy available. So there's some pretty key
Yeah,
questions I would ask. The service that I provide is very much an end-to-end service where a client will come to me either for a home, either their first home or their family home or downsizing, something for them to live in, or for an investment. And they'll engage me to find them that property. So we'd start off with a scope of the property scope. And I'm there saying, what is important to you in your home? How do you need to live in the space? And a lot of people have a pretty broad idea of, oh, we need this many bedrooms and this many bathrooms and maybe a couple of key parameters. But the first part of my service is really fleshing that right out, particularly for a home buyer, not so much for an investor. Just really fleshing out what are the things that you must have in this home that are not negotiable. And then we'll talk about the things that might be ideal, that are nice to have,
yeah,
and then commence the search from there. I'm then searching for my clients every single day on market. So realestate.com, domain.com, but also searching for off-market properties as well. And that involves relying on relationships within the industry, calling sales agents saying, look, I've got a client who's looking for this type of property in this location. What might you have coming up or off-market that I haven't seen yet? And
yeah,
really trying to find those matches. So ensuring that the clients have every possible opportunity, they don't miss anything, is really important.
yeah. Just on that, because I remember we've spoken many times in the past, and I was quite surprised that the percentage of off-market properties that are out there, that if you're not really
Yeah.
deeply engaged with real estate agents, you just don't even know that those properties are even on the market that exists.
Yeah, something like 40% properties transact without even ever appearing on realestate.com or domain.com. So it's a huge percentage.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of a misconception. Off market is a bit of a buzz topic that people think, oh, I'd love an off market property. But just do be careful that not all off market properties are good. It's just like what you see on market.
Right.
You don't want to be missing such a volume. You at least want to know about them, filter through them in the same way that you would your on-market selection as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
But
no.
just being exposed, if it's a tight market and it's a competitive market, if you're doing it alone, for example, only looking at realestate.com or domain,
Yeah.
if you're missing nearly half the properties that are actually available, then that's a huge number of properties, and
Massive.
could well be your dream home or dream investment property that you just don't even know exists.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you don't have to be an advocate to get off market properties, but you do have to be persistent and
Yeah.
tenacious with the agents. And they need to probably feel that you are a very genuine buyer. I think that's the advantage that an advocate has over a general buyer, where they feel that, okay, if you're coming to me, this is your profession, you've got a qualified buyer or potentially a list of qualified buyers.
Mm.
So they're going to give us that time. So as a buyer representing yourself, you can certainly still get those opportunities. But yeah, you need to really convey that you are genuine, that you're not going to be a time waster. I think that's probably the perception if you're not represented by an advocate in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess just back to the process. So you meet with the client, understand exactly what they want from their property, you do the research, and then on to the next step.
Yep. So start searching high and low, absolutely everything. There is no limit to the number of properties we'll look at. We'll go through them together. That's a really important part of the process, because if I send a client through, they might go, oh, yeah, that's really great, but they might have missed something fundamental in the surrounding properties, in the aspect, in the configuration of the floor plan that you can't really get a sense of online. So I'm looking at properties physically with my clients, and I'll encourage them to have at least a second inspection, whether with or without me. So you must see the property more than once. That's my rule. And ideally at different times of day. So you can get a bit of a sense of how the area feels at different times of day. If there's a school nearby, does the street just fill up with cars? Or if it's close to some nightlife, for example, that really changes the vibe in the evening. Checking out the natural light at different times of day, that sort of thing. So we're just searching constantly until we find a match. So we know that at a high level, there's no big compromises to the property because we've done that initial assessment as we go. And then the client has said, yep, this feels right for me. This feels like a home that I'd be happy with and can live in. From there is when I can...
Sometimes I imagine that might be many homes that they've inspected to get to that point that you've helped them and guided them through.
Yeah, many homes, many months. Yeah, doesn't matter. It's about getting it right. It's such a significant transaction financially and emotionally and from a lifestyle perspective that we have to get that right.
Yes, purchase, 99% of the time, I think for most of us, the largest purchase you're ever going to make is your home.
Yeah.
So it is a critical one to get right.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes a client will say, I'll present them something that ticks all the boxes on the brief. This is what you asked for. And then we'll walk in there and it just doesn't feel right. That's okay.
The vibe's wrong.
It has to feel right. And sometimes you can't put your finger on what it is. And we'll try and understand that as best as we can. And usually we get the similar sense of when the vibe is on or off. And we just keep looking. Yeah, we've got to get that right. That's really important. There's no time frame and there's no limit.
Yeah.
Once we've got the match is when I then conduct a very thorough due diligence process, and that's to uncover anything that we can't see or that we don't know on the surface about the property. So this is really about getting it right and making sure that we're not entering into a property that has potential massive compromises both now or into the future.
Yeah.
So looking at, of course, I'm helping facilitate a building and pest inspection, reviewing the contract of sale with a conveyancer or a solicitor, and helping my clients understand the things that come from that, because that can be full of jargon and a little bit confusing as well. So,
and actually making sure they're getting the right support from other trusted professionals. So I imagine you have within your network some trusted conveyancers, building and pest inspectors and other professionals that you can introduce your clients to.
That's right, that I know are just excellent at their job. They're going to be the most thorough people. The building and pest inspections reports that we get are between 50 and 130 odd pages long. They are super thorough. But what I say to my clients is that we just want to know every possible risk, and then at least we go into that transaction, we decide to progress with the knowledge and with confidence of what we're getting. I also do my own assessment of the property, and that's where I'm comparing the property to other similar properties just to ensure that fundamentally it is an A-grade property. Because that's coming back to what I was saying before. There is a difference between good and bad real estate.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess the A-grade property, does that differ depending on whether it's going to be someone's own home that they're going to live in or whether it's an investment property? I imagine there's some slightly different criteria that you would look at depending on what the purchase is.
It's a really good question. There's not a difference in terms of good and bad real estate at that level. The difference is, does this suit my clients as a home? So once we've ticked that box, actually the next stage in terms of assessment of the property is very much the same whether it's an investment or not.
Yeah.
And I'll always say to my home buyer clients, your job is to know when the property suits you as a home, and then my job is to make sure it's good real estate for you.
Yeah.
From the investment perspective, we're circumventing that first process around, does it feel like the right home? But we also want it to feel like the right home for a potential renter. But then we're checking the fundamentals regardless from there.
Yeah. And I guess that for an investor, they might have different objectives around a property that might generate a high yield versus a property that might generate exceptional capital growth.
Yeah.
Ideally both, but they all come in with a slightly different angle and a slightly different need.
Yeah, they'll have different priorities perhaps. They'll also maybe have a different time frame, which makes a difference in terms of what property you might buy. A home buyer might say to me, this home is likely to last us the next 5 to 7 years. And then we think when the kids are this age or when this happens in our life, we're going to move on and we'd like to upgrade or move or whatnot. Whereas an investor might say, I'm purchasing this property in my self-managed super fund and it's a 20-year strategy.
Right.
And that's a bit of a different approach to what you might look at purchasing. So it does depend on their objectives.
Yep.
But the assessment of it is still quite similar.
Yeah. So once you've gone through and you've analysed and you've done the building and pest and you've decided that this is the property that they're going to have a go at and they want to buy, I guess then it comes down to the actual purchase process and negotiating with the real estate agent before it goes to auction or then taking it to auction. So how do you navigate that part of the process?
Yeah, exactly. And the first part of that process, regardless of the method of sale, whether it's a private sale, an EOI, an auction, is understanding the value of the property. Now, you might have to stop me because I could talk for ages about understanding the value of the property and also comparing the value of the property to the quote range or the guided price. That's where a lot of buyers become unstuck. Buyers sometimes, my client will come to me sometimes after they've been looking and failing for several months. And often the reason, sometimes years actually, and often the reason is that they've not been able to understand the value of the property they've been interested in. They might have looked at the quoted range and added 50 grand, 100 grand, 10%. Everyone's got their own method of how to value the property based on the range. My advice is ignore the range. It's really hard to do, but just ignore the quoted range. It might be accurate. It's probably not, but it might be.
Yeah.
Ignore that and instead find information, find data to help you value the property. And of course, I do that for my clients. And there is a bit of art and a bit of science to it, which is why it can be a little bit tricky. If you're only buying a property once every decade, then it's hard to know where to look and how to assess that. Providing that valuation before we get into the acquisition is really important. The best way to do that is I've got software that helps me quickly find sold data. But if you don't have that, you can just jump onto realestate.com. There's a sold tab. Look for recent sales near the property that you're looking to acquire. Understand what that property sold for.
Yep.
Sometimes prices are undisclosed on market, but often they are disclosed. So you can find out what they sold for and then try and critically assess unemotionally how that property is different to the one that you're looking to acquire. And is it overall slightly better or slightly worse or comparable? And that helps shape the valuation.
Yeah. And I guess that's where it's really critical to have an independent third party like yourself. When you mentioned that word, unemotionally evaluate. When you're buying that home that, you can see it, it's your dream home, it's your forever home, you can see yourself raising a family there or whatever.
Yeah.
Emotions do get in the way. And I imagine that can then inflate the valuations or sometimes what some people are prepared to pay, which may not always be bad if you are going to live there for 20 odd years and it's your dream home. But you want to make a really smart decision and a smart financial decision, having someone like yourself as a sounding board to take the emotion out of the process is really important.
Yeah. And paying more than it's worth because you love it might be okay, but you at least want to know what it's worth and still be in a position to make an informed decision. So I'll typically give my clients a bit of a guide and I'll say, mathematically, unemotionally, this property sits between X and Y. And here's the data. Here's how I've come up with that figure. I didn't guess. It's based on this information. And then you might say, look, paying X amount, we talk about that, above where that data sits is maybe still reasonable buying because, as you've said, it suits the lifestyle, it's potentially a long-term prospect. And then I give them a bit of a walk-away price and say, look, above this price, the data really shows that we should actually get something else for our money. We should get bigger land, an additional bedroom, a better location. It's still then up to the client what they decide to pay, but at least my job is to provide all the information, give them as much confidence around that as possible, and then they're still in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, the acquisition can come a bit more naturally from there once you've understood the value. And knowing where the value sits in relation to the quoted range
Yeah.
be an awesome tool to figure out what's the next move.
Yeah. And do you find these days, in the past, I think it's meant to have cleaned up a bit, but real estate agents were notorious at underquoting the value of properties to get more people through the door and
Yeah,
let the emotion take over on auction day. Are you finding they're a little bit closer these days to the valuations that you're putting on properties? Or?
there's a huge range out there. There isn't a blanket. It's
Yeah.
not everything is always underquoted. That's definitely not the case. It depends on the agent, the agency, and probably the vendor. Some agents might encourage a vendor to put the price on market a touch lower because they know that gaining that momentum and building competition is actually going to get them the best price.
Yeah.
And the vendor might say, I'm absolutely not comfortable with that. I don't understand that strategy. And so the vendor might push back on particular pricing as well, which is why it's best to try and just remove that. But yeah, typically when a property is scheduled for auction, it's likely that the quoted range is probably undervalued. By
Right.
how much? It just depends. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. And then, so you've worked out the fair value of the property and you've got the numbers all lined up and now you're ready to make an offer. Is that typically done before auction or do you also help clients do the bidding at auctions?
Yeah, so whatever the acquisition process from then on includes, I'll help with. If we
Yep.
believe that the best strategy is to go through to auction, then we'll do that. And absolutely, I'll bid on their behalf, which is a huge relief to a lot of clients because people find it absolutely petrifying.
Yeah. Is it nice doing the bidding? You enjoy that part of the process?
Yeah, it's fun. It's really
Yeah.
good. It's
Yeah.
street theatre sometimes. Probably more than just the actual bidding. I really enjoy coming up with the strategy
Yeah.
of how we're going to bid, when we're going to bid, what increments we're going to bid in, that sort of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And you do that based on intel, right? So from
Okay.
the first interaction with the sales agent at the first open for inspection that you go to, just chatting, asking questions. What can you tell me about the vendor? Are they living here? Was it rented? Have they moved on? Have they bought something? What's the situation? Just general inquiries. You might not end up being interested in that property, but if you are, the information that you can gather along the way might be helpful. Understanding how many groups have inspected this property, what's the level of interest, get a gauge of is it competitive or is it not competitive. In most cases, if it's a great property, regardless of what else is happening in the market, it's going to be pretty competitive.
Yeah.
So knowing that is going to help formulate your acquisition strategy. Most of the time, if a property of interest is going to auction, my strategy would be to try and avoid that. So to try and stop the auction. That's sometimes easier said than done. And rightly, usually the best outcome for the vendor is going to be at auction. And that's the exact reason that I want to try and avoid it. I want to avoid that Saturday afternoon, the sun is shining, you're there looking at the beautiful property that you've fallen in love with over the last 4 weeks, and you went there with the budget of 1.8 million and you are stretching to 1.810, 1.815, 1.820 because you're there and the crowd's there and the auctioneer's going, come on, just one
Yeah.
more. And you're like, okay. I
So
want
close. Yeah. Like, what's an extra 10 grand when you're at that amount?
to
But you can overstretch pretty quickly, I imagine, when emotions get in the way.
easily. And I don't want to be competing against other buyers who are stretching like that.
Yeah.
So if I can avoid that, I will. And you do that by making perhaps what I'd call an uncomfortable offer prior to auction. And that really comes back to taking the quoted range and understanding the value and finding something in between.
Yeah.
And that can be a bit of a delicate process, but it's definitely worth trying, because if successful and you can stop the auction and trigger the sale beforehand, you might eliminate some serious competition or just stop it rolling on
Yeah.
with stretching buyers.
Yeah. And when you say uncomfortable offer, is that maybe just offering a little bit more than what the client thought they were going to based on that quoted range? Because I've seen a couple of first home buyers in my line of work that put in a lowball offer before auction, and
Yeah. How did
tried
you
to talk them out of it, and 100% of the time it has not worked and it goes through to auction. I think they're just hoping, I don't know, it's almost like you're at a market or something and you want to put in a lowball offer in the off chance that they want to sell you that item. But
Yeah.
it's not going to happen for a house, because particularly those that are new to buying property probably don't realise always that the real estate agent, their job is to maximise the sale price vendor or the seller,
Yeah.
whereas you're coming in and your objective is to get the best deal for the buyer, who is your client. It's probably to differentiate the two roles there.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. And you've got to, and that's why knowing the value is so important, because if you just put in a lowball offer, you have to think, if I was the vendor, or you're talking to the agent who's representing the vendor, what are they going to think? How is this going to sit with them? If the agent has told them we've had a really well attended campaign, we've had 50 groups through, 10 contract requests, 2 building inspections, like that's going well. Why would the vendor consider your lowball offer?
Yeah.
They just wouldn't. If you think you can really buy it for that price, then go to auction. But yeah, you've got to understand, the value and then the parameters. So yeah, making an offer, it's not always above the top end of the quote range. It just does depend on all of those other factors. But
Yeah.
making an offer that you think is compelling. Maybe there's some doubt created as to whether or not you're going to pursue the auction if this wasn't successful. You've got to really try and put yourself in a position where that offer is worth the vendor and the agent considering. And that might be on terms as well. If you get onto a property really quickly, and time can make a huge difference in real estate. So let's say a pre-market opportunity is the best, but let's say you just see the property the day that it's listed on market on
Yeah.
realestate.com, and maybe you jump on the phone to the agent and you can get through the next day and it's a match and you like it. You can get all your due diligence done really quickly, contract review, building inspection. If you were to make an offer in those first few days that was a fair but compelling offer, and you could offer a really quick settlement, and from your conversation with the agent, that is a compelling factor for the vendors, that could put forward a bit of a win scenario.
Yeah. I imagine if
Absolutely.
if the vendor's a bit worried about a lengthy process to get it to market, and then a long settlement period where they're still paying significant amounts of repayments on the loan for that property, particularly if it's an investment property and they just want it gone.
Yeah.
Putting that early offer, it might be beneficial, because what the vendor might lose out a fraction in terms of what you've offered, they're going to gain because they're not paying that loan off for the next few months as well. So
And they're just not rolling the dice with what's going to happen. What
yeah,
if you don't get?
creating strategy.
Yeah. But every transaction is very different. So just arming yourself with as much intel as you possibly can, and formulating a strategy based on that is my best advice.
Yeah, magic. And so once you've made the acquisition, you've bought the property for the client, and they've popped the champagne, they've taken the photo with the sold sticker out the front. That would be very rewarding, I imagine. And is that sort of the end of the service that you offer there? I imagine for first home buyers or for investors, do you help them then potentially find property managers, so if they want to rent out the property and so on?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not the end of the process. Even before settlement, you're also entitled to a final inspection, which
Yep.
you generally have conducted within the week prior to settlement. So I'll always go with my clients to that inspection, because, again, if you haven't done it before, you don't know what you're there looking for. I'm there with my clients. They're like, what are we doing here? So that inspection is really just to check that the property is fundamentally in the same state and condition it was
Yep.
the day that you bought it. So I'm walking through that with them, just answering any questions right throughout that settlement period. People often don't know what happens on settlement day. Do I need to take the day off work? Also, when do I get the keys? How do I get the keys?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to access the property before that? People have a lot of questions. And for us in property, it seems very common because we deal with it every day. But if it's your first time or you haven't done it in 15 and 20 years, then yeah, I'm just there to answer all those questions and connect my clients with people who they need to be connected with from there on in. So insurance brokers, making sure you've got adequate insurance for your brand new purchase, whether that's the actual bricks and mortar itself, or whether or not you need to consider personal insurance now that you've got a big debt. I'm circling back to my personal insurance days there.
Yeah.
And yeah, connecting investors with great property managers. A good property manager can make a massive difference in your overall investment property experience.
Yeah.
Having run that business previously, I'm very passionate about making sure my clients get the right service for that next part of the process too. Yep,
Yeah.
I'm there with any property questions at all.
Yeah, amazing. At the start, you said you did offer that end-to-end service, and
Yeah,
there's a heck of a lot that goes into that service proposition. You also mentioned there's other advocates and agents that offer. There's a varying range of services that advocates offer,
yeah,
and also I've come across a couple recently that their pitch is that they actually don't charge their clients, and instantly that raises a bit of a red flag for me because I wonder who their client actually is. Typically, I find that they're working for a property developer and taking a commission off the
oh,
property developer,
yes.
which I wouldn't call them a buyer's agent at all. So, are there any particular questions you touched on at the start that you should really ask a buyer's advocate, just to be sure of the services that you're getting?
Yeah. That's a good. A lot of these advocates are probably more property spruikers.
Mm,
They have a particular property that they're really selling it. They're connecting you, the buyer, to that property, but they're really selling and typically an off the plan proposition. Yeah, some really good questions to ask from that perspective. Are you being incentivized to recommend a particular property? Or do you have a relationship, a commercial relationship with any specific parties in this transaction?
yeah,
You want to know that your advocate is independent of any real estate agent or any developer specifically, so that you have confidence that they're acting only in your best interest. That's really important. A couple of the other really common things that I see some genuine advocates offering, but the service just is a bit different, is around timeframes. So sometimes it's a 3-month service or a 6-month service, just understanding what that might look like if you came towards the end of that service. Sometimes there's a limit of number of properties that they'll assist you with. So just trying to get a gauge on what happens, because
yeah,
let's say, for example, we've found that property match that we talked about before. We've done all the due diligence. We've understood the value. We've either tried to buy it before, made an offer, or gone to auction, and we're unsuccessful. That happens. I'd love to say that I buy it 100% of the time, the first time. Sometimes somebody's just there.
yeah. They've got a very motivated competitor
Yeah,
that wants it
yeah,
more, yeah, and
pockets,
has access to more money. Yeah,
100%. So when that fails, we just start again. We're just
yeah,
back to the drawing board. We're back on realestate.com. I'm calling other agents. I'm saying, what else have you got? It just keeps going. So understanding the scope of the service is important, and also the pricing. So the way that the pricing structure works is very different between advocates. Some
yeah,
will charge in increments all along the way. You get to milestones where it's been 3 months or 6 months, and there's payments along the way. So just questioning, how all of that works and making
yeah.
sure that you understand it and that it's in line with your expectations as well.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously no hidden fees or hidden commissions that are paid by developers and things like that, because that's when
Yeah,
you really have to question: are
yeah.
they working in your best interest or the developer's interest or their own interests? But,
Right. Yeah,
so
exactly.
that should all, if obviously you're an ethical advocate, that would all be disclosed in a lot of detail up front with any engagement with the client.
Yeah,
They should
that's
be
right.
looking for. Yeah,
And maybe the answers to those questions are yes, that they are incentivized in certain ways, and maybe you're comfortable with that, but at least I think you want to know that your advocate is working solely in your interest.
yeah, yeah, perfect. And you're seeing, I'm conscious of time, but just in your experience, are there any current trends or opportunities in the market that you're seeing, buyers wanting more of a particular type of house or type of property these days? In the past, what's sort of the vibe in the
Yeah.
market at the moment?
Yeah, one thing that's definitely pretty sought after across the board, regardless of price point, is a bit of a working from home space. Not
Yeah.
everybody needs a study with a closed door, but a lot of people need a study nook, somewhere to set up their desk,
Yeah.
whether it's a particularly large bedroom or living space that can accommodate that, or in more family homes is having a separate study. So that's really common. And also, if you're an investor, thinking about that, because knowing that your renters might value that sort of space can be the difference in the rentability of that
Yeah.
property.
Yeah,
In
it
terms,
makes sense. I remember having when COVID first hit and having the desk in the bedroom for the first 6 months. I think that was absolutely to go back to that. Everyone wants a little bit of extra space. Now that we
yeah,
have more flexibility, right, businesses allow employees to work from home 2 or 3 days a week.
yeah,
Um,
so
so
many.
you need somewhere that's sustainable for you and an area that you can be productive.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other opportunity broadly at the moment is probably in the sub $1.2 million space. I say 1.2, that's not a hard figure at all, but
Yeah.
really investors have been leaving the Melbourne market over the last probably 15 months, where 13 rate rises and some land tax increases have become untenable for a lot of investors. They entered the investment space with a certain set of parameters. Those parameters changed, and so they've exited. So that's created a huge supply of properties in that investment space, which is why I say under 1.2. But if you're looking under a mil, there's just more properties available now than we've seen in a really long time. And there's
Right.
not as many buyers for those opportunities. So you often don't have to compete as much as you would have 18 months, 2 years ago.
Yep.
It's interesting though, because that set of circumstances is then also leading investors back to Melbourne because they're going, there's actually really good buying opportunities. So, first home buyers and investors, it's a great time to buy. That could shift once we see an interest rate reduction, which who knows when that's going to be later.
Fingers crossed. There's a few predicted over the next 12 months, but
Yeah. And
there were a few predicted this year as well, which hasn't come to fruition. But
yeah,
time
if
will tell.
and when it happens, it'll
Yep.
probably happen eventually. Who
Yeah.
knows when? I think the market could kick. So, really good buying opportunity right now in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks for your time, Lauren. It's been a
Nice.
wonderful chat, and you provided a ton of great information and insights for whether first home buyers, those that are upgrading, or property investors. Yeah, as you can see, Lauren offers a very detailed service from end to end. And I think when someone's spending $1 million, $2 million, $5 million on a property, it's the largest purchase that we're ever going to make in our lives for most of us.
Yeah.
Getting some expert advice and paying for that independent professional advice can be one of the best investments that you'll ever make, to make sure that huge purchase is going to tick all the boxes for you and you're not going to have any hidden dramas or hidden traps that you weren't aware of. So having that hand holding along the way and that expert guidance is critically important. So really appreciate your time. If there's anyone out there that wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way that they can reach out?
Yep. They can email me, lauren@beckettproperty.com.au. They can find me on all the social platforms. Actually, I'm on TikTok, but I don't really know about that. So go to LinkedIn, Lauren Allingham, Instagram, or Facebook, or yeah, call or text me. My number's on our Beckett Property website. So yeah, reach out with any questions at all. I'm happy to just talk to anybody who's interested to talk about property and just provide some guidance along the way.
Awesome. All right. Really appreciate your time today, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers. Thanks.